Avengers! Assemble.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Excelsior, the world's #1 Marvel's Avengers podcast, seasonal Spider-Man review show, but this week a Guardians of the Galaxy podcast as well. I'm your director, Christian Buckley, joined as always by the Apex legend, Jack Martin.
A spooky Excelsior to you, Christian.
Thank you.
Yeah, Halloween episode.
Yeah, it is. I didn't really realize that, but this is going up the day on Halloween Eve.
So. Yeah, man, Halloween Eve should be more of a thing.
It should, right? Because like Halloween, half the time, especially when you were a kid, it's on like a Wednesday, and
that was the worst.
It ruins the vibe. But the night before, it's still a Tuesday, but you know, a Tuesday night is better than a Wednesday day.
Halloween Eve should be the mischief night, where everyone's going around throwing some toilet paper. Mm-hmm. There should be movies based on, it's the mischief night, and people die on mischief night. Mm-hmm. We should make that a thing. That should be more of a thing.
Yeah, how long does it take to get a holiday going?
Oh, man. I don't know. I feel like there's a holiday for about everything nowadays, so I'm sure we could get that going very soon. Okay. Just how much does it become a thing? That takes probably a bit.
Well, how are you doing, Jack? How's Marvel been treating you outside of the required elements of practice for this show this week?
Yeah, Marvel has been good to me. Pretty much only sticking to what we're going to talk about. I haven't deviated from the course really at all. Thinking about getting into some comics specifically to prepare for Spider-Man, but I'm really interested in what we're going to talk about specifically with the MCU. There's some intriguing developments with quotes and the most upcoming movie that I'm very interested in talking about. So, yeah, a lot of interesting stuff going on in the week of Marvel. But, yeah, how are you?
I'm good, you know. It's a lot of Marvel stuff right now. Unfortunately, I haven't had tons of time with everything I wanted for this episode, but we do have much to discuss. Like you said, some news about Eternals, Spider-Man stuff, the Guardians game, of course, and the Amazing Spider-Man. But first, let's get to the, not boring part, but the part that you're here for the most part. Marvel's Avengers this week in the game. There's not much, believe it or not. They told us last week there wouldn't be much, and by God, there's not much.
Yeah, they provided a good update for us. That they got us ready for this.
Yeah.
Sure.
So there was a state of play from Sony this week, and we all were kind of, even though they warned us, they're like, hey, no comments till November. A lot of us, you and I weren't alone in thinking this, but we were expecting to see a Spider-Man trailer for the game. Not yet, but hopefully soon, right?
That state of play was an absolute waste of time.
Oh yeah, that was a blog post. I closed my eyes and I imagined a visual showpiece that went with the blog post. That's what it was.
Yep. Even with those expectations going into it, like considering maybe it's possible, it was like even that more offensive. Where we're like, oh man, that was not worth watching.
It really wasn't. No Marvel stuff in there, unfortunately, but in the marketplace for Marvel's Avengers, a Marvel hub, we got some Halloween skins we talked about last week. They're showcased this week, as well as the Iron Man Mark V from the MCU, Jack. Do you know which one this is?
Yes, this is the suitcase suit from Iron Man 2 when Tony Stark he crashes from Whiplash's attack, and then Happy Hogan drive onto the cart in Monaco and throws in the suit, and he suits up. And I believe Happy Hogan calls it the football, which is really cool.
I, as a child, remember this suit being all over the marketing for this movie.
Yeah. I feel like usually with the Iron Man movies, the new suit is on full display for sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's definitely a unique one. There's been no suit since that looks like this, and I find it very funny that I believe with most of the suits, at least like Endgame time, we're calling them like Mark whatever with the Arabic numerals, but this is a full-blown V. We're going MGS5 here. This is the Mark V, Roman
When I
numerals.
Yeah, when I saw Mark V, I immediately thought of Master Chief's armor from Halo 2.
Mm-hmm.
He was in Mark V. Halo 2. He was in Mark V. And I believe also Halo 1. So that's cool. For me personally, I'm not a big silver guy for Iron Man. I think it's interesting that he has those suits every once in a while, but I'm a traditional red and gold kind of guy. So this doesn't do it for me, but I think it's very intricate. I love how you can kind of tell this came out of a suitcase. Like, all the parts in this were, like, part of that suitcase design, and they just were reformed to fit his body. So I think it's really cool looking. It's just not for me.
Yeah, it's very cool, and it's another one of those MCU suits from a random-ass MCU movie in this game. Gives you hope for literally anybody's suit they want in this game. There's a chance at this point,
Yeah, you were messaging me saying, like, that much closer to his Iron Man 3 suit,
dude,
which would be amazing.
The full, mostly gold Iron Man 3 suit that's fallen apart the whole movie, I love that thing. I wish they used it more. It's so good. I will buy it, absolutely, when it comes out. So.
See, for me, that was a suit that was all across the marketing that really got me, where I was very much interested in that suit. So, yeah, definitely hoping that comes at some point.
Fingers crossed. But you know what you already have access to right now, Jack?
What's that?
If you log into your Square Enix account, which apparently I have two. I didn't know that. I made one for a Final Fantasy 14 account with my email I've had forever, and then I was like, oh, I think I have my account tied to this other email I use for subscriptions. And nope, I linked it up with a different account, so I don't know if I have this. But if you're not an idiot like me, you got one Square Enix account, you'll be able to get a Guardians of the Galaxy set of nameplates. You get two of them in your Marvel's Avengers catalog, and I gotta say, they look pretty nice.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. They got one of Star-Lord holding his pistols and another one of just all the Guardians running at the screen, so they're pretty cool.
Yeah, they're solid. Do you like these more than the promotional reveal Guardians nameplate that you and I already have in the game?
I think the second one is fairly comparable, though the team one, and I would say that one, this new one is probably better. It's like more of an action shot, whereas the other one that we already have is kind of more static, and they're all just kind of standing in a line. So yeah, I would say this one's better.
Yeah, I appreciate the art style in these, that they're not strictly going off of like the key art for the game like that first nameplate was. But yeah, they're solid, and it's nice because they're free. But if you are looking to drop some coin, there are sales going on right now. I gave a quick glance to the featured page, where there'd be the bundles, some MCU suits, Cap Wolf, the Halloween team set, Jack. It looks like none of these are being hit by the sale.
Yeah, that's unfortunately kind of expected. Like, I would have probably bought the Cap Wolf suit for 700 credits, but unfortunately that is one of the featured items and is not a part of the sale, it seems.
Maybe next Halloween when there's a new skin set, and then this one's old news, maybe then we can get them cheap.
Maybe.
I mean, I'm not there's not a hole in my pocket. I'm not burning to spend some money in this game right now, so I'm good,
Yeah. I think maybe I'll look in and see what's up, but I will honestly probably forget about it this weekend. But yeah, maybe I'll take a peek.
Yeah, well, keep us updated next week if you pick up any of these. Maybe in November we get some festive corn outfits for all the characters. I mean, who's
That'd
to
be cool.
say? Just get some decorative corn patterns for who's corny? Iron Man. You could do a corn thing with, I'm sure.
That's true. I imagine him in like a straw hat overalls kind of situation.
Sure, yeah. I mean, Clint is the farmer, so I feel like that's also a good safe bet.
That's a good point.
So, well, when it comes to updates for the game right now in the War Table blog, they said, once again, reiterated, early November. Look forward to that. That is when we get our big lowdown on what's going on with the next major content update. And someone in the community on Reddit said next week the blog post needs to be 3 times as long. And then someone from Crystal Dynamics replied and said it will be longer than 3 times the length of this week's War Table blog. It was like a tongue twister right there, but
wow. That you got to imagine they're going to... I was thinking, they're just going to talk about maybe either the Raid or the Spider-Man DLC, but it seems like they're going to talk about just about everything that they have coming up pretty soon.
Yeah, which is exciting, right? Because I was wondering myself, what's it going to be? But I feel like now that presumably the final state of play of the year has happened, I don't think Spider-Man will be in a Sony presentation, and I don't think they'll save Spider-Man for the Game Awards, so I feel like the only other option is it makes sense to talk about Spider-Man when you talk about your other huge, massive content drop that's hitting for everyone, you know?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And also, the clock is kind of ticking on Spider-Man if they want to get him out before the end of the year, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to have 2 months left to do it. Probably like a month and a half if you want to have people enjoy it before the end of the year. So I think next week is very, very likely, and it is probable that Spider-Man will be detailed. I hope we get a trailer with a voice. That would be quite ideal.
I am doubling down on Tobey Maguire returning for this character.
I think that's wild, but I think it would be so sweet if you nailed that.
At the very least, do you think, are we going to have a repeat of Insomniac and Spider-Man? Are we going to have this entire fan base, badgering Crystal Dynamics for this Sam Raimi suit in the game? Or what do you think is going to go down with that? Is that something they've been accounting for since they signed this deal because they saw what happened to Insomniac? Or is this not in the cards?
I think they probably know what's up, or you would hope so. And if that is not included in his legendary outfits, in the game, I think it will be at some point or another. And at the same time, I feel like you have to square what's happening with the MCU right now. So there's probably roughly, conservatively, 20 new suits in the new Spider-Man movie. Yep. So they got to figure out what's going on with that. If Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire come back, they're probably going to want those suits in the game too. So there's a lot of suits that they got to sort of think about in the coming months.
If I were them, because they're going to get comparisons to Insomniac, they have since they announced this thing of you can get all these suits for free in Spider-Man on PS4. I think to sort of negate some of that, it might be smart if in the Spider-Man challenge card they give some really good skins. Maybe throw the Sam Raimi suit and Amazing Spider-Man 1 suits in there and then charge for the MCU Tom Holland suits. Maybe. I
think that would be great, but if this game has taught me anything, I don't think that will happen.
You're correct. You're right. You're fully right. I can see right now the way they've been doing all these MCU reveal skins for the game, how they line up the suit to be sort of in a pose of the movie. You can already envision the blog post that has Sam Raimi Spider-Man climbing up a window of a building. It's all gold, just like the Spider-Man 1 poster. That's an asset on a dev's computer right now.
I think if they have learned something from Insomniac, it is the fervor over those suits, and they just see dollar signs associated with those. So
yeah, I
think they're gonna sell those, which that makes sense. I'm not really surprised with that. Mm-hmm. Will I buy them? That's the question, because there is that point where, probably, unfortunately, I was messing around with Spider-Man PS4 or on the PS5. yesterday, and I was switching between the Raimi and the Amazing Spider-Man suit, and I'm like, man, it's cool that I just have these, and I did not have to pay a dime for them.
It is nice. So next week, our hopes and dreams will most likely be crushed in at least some form, even if it's going to be a long post with a lot of good stuff to mine. But Jack, enough about this Avengers game. The Avengers already struggle having movies as good as Guardians of the Galaxy, and now it looks like they're struggling to have games as good as Guardians of the Galaxy. So it's our Guardians segment. I remembered the name, Nowhere But Here. That's where it is. That's the title of the segment.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, Guardians is out. It came out this week.
I know, that just kind of came out of nowhere, really.
It did. It really did. Which is wild, considering both of us were looking forward to this game pretty significantly. And then I remember, like, last Friday or Saturday, we were talking, and you're like, oh yeah, I pre-ordered it. And I was like, shit, that's Tuesday. That's soon. So here we are.
Yeah, and to your point, like, I think we're very excited, more so than a lot of people, for this game.
Mm-hmm.
And that even took us by surprise. And I think this game especially took a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah, which is wild to see, because upon the reveal at E3 this year, you, me, Kevin Diaz, we all watched the Square conference. We reacted to it. The three of us loved what we saw of this game upon its reveal. Loved the tone, loved everything we saw, thought it showed very well. And then on the internet, everybody was like, Walmart Guardians are back, just like the Avengers. And there was just a lot of negativity around the game. Some of it warranted, because while not the same devs, published by Square Enix, people were burned by Avengers. We were not that much, but it was an interesting road from the reveal to now. And then, like you said, the game seemed to have surprised a lot of people because it's getting kind of glowing reviews.
Yeah, it's getting lots of 8s. I've seen a lot of sites sort of settle on the 8 for this game, which is really good. I think we were sort of expecting like a 7 to 8 experience, and it's nice to hear that a lot of people are thinking about this game in like a higher regard than even we were kind of expecting. So that's nice.
Yeah. So as it stands, we're not going to get too deep into spoilers, but the two of us have played a decent amount of the intro so far. I stopped at the beginning of Chapter 2. I've logged about 2 hours into the game so far. You're a bit beyond me, so where are you time and chapter-wise right now?
I'm not sure about time. We were discussing before the show. I finished the chapter that you just started. So there's not really too much more I could say even than you can. The chapter I just played doesn't really feature a lot of combat. So in terms of like describing gameplay, we're pretty much on the same level.
Cool. So you're playing on PS5.
Mm-hmm.
I'm playing on Xbox Series S. I think the immediate thing I want to shout out is this game is surprisingly beautiful, very intricate facial animations, and runs very well.
That's a really good observation, especially with the facial animations. That's something that surprised me. Even walking around the Milano and watching Peter Quill talk to the Guardians, his eyes will sort of dart off into the distance, or he'll have very minute, specific expressions around his eyes and mouth, which took me a lot by surprise. I did not expect that level of detail for this type of game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a really great addition and very, very surprising.
Yeah, and I think that on a surface level just really helps get invested with this take on the Guardians. And I think from the jump, the thing that's different here is that, at least from my perspective, tell me if you feel differently, I'm playing this game and I'm feeling like it's just another Guardians of the Galaxy adventure, where I was introduced to this team, like many people were, through the movies. I've read a few different runs of comics since then, but to me, I feel like Guardians acknowledges the MCU and like stands next to it in a way that makes it so I'm not sitting there like, oh, Chris Pratt would have delivered it like this. Zoe Saldana might have been better in the situation, where Avengers has that constant comparison, even though you and I don't really feel it that much. There is that cloud over it, and I think it is because Avengers out the gate was kind of like, what's the MCU? We don't know what that is. This is the Avengers. You know the Avengers. This is them. Right?
Yeah, I feel like you pretty much get over those comparisons pretty quickly. I feel like Guardians, the game, feels pretty similar in a good way to the MCU. Like you understand the characters and you're already on board with them. It's like dissimilar to how Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as a comic book was very serious, and the like adaptations on like film and TV were like very silly and zany. You kind of just have the same feeling between Guardians, the movie and comics, and the game. Like you get what this team is about, and even though they're voiced by different people, you already pretty much know their characters. So like after you get over that hump, you fall into it pretty quick.
Yeah, and let me know how you feel about this. Like, I remember when the game was revealed, we talked about this on the show. Like, I wasn't fully sold on mainly Star-Lord, but I think in context of playing the game, I like this take on Star-Lord like a lot, and I like this take on each Guardian of the team a lot. Like, surprisingly, I think they're all standing on their own, giving me what I kind of want out of these characters, but also surprising me with some of their moral stances or discussions and banter amongst everybody, which I also love. But Quill was my worry going in, and almost immediately, based off how the game starts, I am on board with this version of Peter Quill.
I think he's probably the Guardian that is the most distracting, I guess, in terms of like how you picture the character and like how they interpret him. Mm-hmm. For me, at least, I got over all the other Guardians like very quickly and sort of fell in with them. I'm still sort of learning to hear his voice and accept that as Peter Quill. He kind of has like a very exaggerated tone to him.
Yeah.
So like I'm sure that'll iron out over the course of the game, and I really haven't played that much, but yeah, so far there are instances where I'm like, oh, that kind of sounded a little off.
I think it was a really good choice to open the game the way they did, because similar to the James Gunn films, the first thing we see is a young Peter Quill in Missouri having an interaction with his mom, and I think that does a lot to, for the movie at least, it did a lot to establish why Star-Lord grew to the person he is. And in this game, I think Peter's a little bit older in his past, in this flashback. His mom doesn't appear to be ill. I don't know if the origin in the comics is similar to the one in the Gunn films, but it felt different, but it still was a really charming, heartwarming interaction between the two of them, I thought, at least, and I thought it was a fun way to open it that I didn't expect.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of over the whole, oh, let's do a cold open and have the character explore the room. Like, this is very much like The Last of Us sort of situation. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not bad by any means, but I thought it was fine. I wasn't really blown away by this scene really all that much, but it was nice to have that experience of exploring around the room and seeing what's up and get the opening with his mom, because I would assume we're going to get more, because it was very short. It kind of just ends. But yeah, it was just, for me, I was like, I've seen this scene 1,000 times in other games.
Yeah, I think it kind of just surprised me that it was in there, I think. And it leaves off with the indication, at least from my read, that, like you said, we're going to come back to this storyline at some point, which I thought was interesting, because it was cut surprisingly short of just, you're really in his room and then you leave the room and then you just jump into the Milano and have your interactions modern day. I want to ask you this also. What do you think of the way they're handling choices and dialogue so far for you as a player?
I can't tell if there's really a substantive difference to like the choices that you make and if it really affects like any interactions. I think there are choices like in a lot of RPGs that matter more than some other choices. And I don't think I've really crossed those yet. Maybe once or twice in the mission I just played, there was like maybe some sides you could take, but other than that, it seems kind of there to be fun in most instances where like you're traveling through a mission and some characters are having a back and forth and you can sort of like side with one character or sort of egg one character on. That's fun. But it doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like it alters the story in, any crazy way, which I don't think I was expecting, but it just kind of seems there as a gameplay mechanic.
Yeah, and I kind of like that because I feel like it helps to get immersed in the game, sort of, in the world and what's going on, where unlike a Mass Effect or like a Witcher or something where dialogue choices are really meaningful, I find myself in those games at least struggling trying to find a balance of like, am I RPing this or is this what I would do in that scenario? Where here, because they don't let you stew on these choices, it's like you got two options, you got a timer, you probably got like maybe less than 10 seconds to choose between the two. I find myself just looking at both options and usually pretty easily figuring out in my head what I think this Star-Lord would say in that scenario. And it is low stakes in a way that makes it fun, and more often than not, at least on the first mission, when I had dialogue options, like the one that stands out to me is you're traveling with Rocket and Groot along this space junk mass of things that you're trying to navigate. Rocket falls, Groot falls to catch him. Rocket just kind of laughs it off as like, oh, whatever. And then as Peter, you can either tell on Rocket to Gamora and Drax, or you can cover for him, and then almost immediately after, you get another choice where Rocket is still talking about it, clearly shaken, and you can either be like, dude, that wasn't cool, like, you messed up, you don't do it again, or you can just sort of, like, move on from it. So, on those angles, I think I like the dialogue because between the timer, between the scale of it, and the fact that I just really like hearing these characters talking to each other, it makes it feel like I'm there and I don't know if they're going for those Mass Effect, Paragon, Renegade, what's going to happen to your ending sort of thing. They could, but so far, like you said, not so much. And I kind of like that.
Yeah, I think I probably need more time with that mechanic to see if it's like meaningful at all. I think that comes into games a lot of times, and by the end of it, it's like that was kind of unnecessary. It kind of feels like, I don't know, just like a gameplay mechanic, really, just to have something to do. I do like the banter between the Guardians, and that's sort of something that I really liked in the gameplay chunk that I had, especially like just going off to find a collectible, and almost every time someone will comment and just be like, hey man, where are you going? We have a mission to do. Mm-hmm. I think that's a really funny choice, and I think it's sort of emblematic of the conversations that you'll have with the other Guardians. Even a little bit after that mission, you could go around the Milano and talk to some of the Guardians, and I thought that was pretty cool. And just being able to be the captain and go around, see what's up with people, see if you can, develop a bond with them over time. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Also worth shouting out, before the game even kicks off, there are lots and lots of settings and accessibility features to go through, which is great. I've seen a lot of people praising the game for everything it can do to be modified so a wide pool of players can enjoy the game. I will say the only thing I've toggled so far is I cranked the sensitivity a little bit, and I also shut off the compass because early on, I think I shut off the compass like in the pre-game options menus because this is a game I'm just kind of vibing with. I feel, and I want to just take my time and look through every corner the way I do in an Uncharted. Looking for treasures, and I found myself just exploring more naturally so far. Um, so I like that I have the compass off just because it feels like I am sort of just navigating with my crew and figuring out what's up. Um, when I find a secret, it's cool. I don't know if the secrets are labeled on the compass, but I did find Rocket and Groot's MCU skins in the first mission, just from like naturally looking around, and I thought that was neat. I was a fan of that.
Are you gonna leave those on?
I don't know. I'm not sure yet. Yeah, let's talk skins for a sec. The only thing I've changed so far is I gave Rocket his 2014 Guardians movie outfit because it's not that different from his game outfit.
It's really not.
Like, they're orange jumpsuits. They're pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
I really love the context and meaning and in-game explanations for Peter's jacket. I don't like the shoulder pads, so I have switched almost immediately to using the Social Lord outfit, which is from a comic run that I really like. That's the very sleek blue leather motorcycle jacket with the white trim and the Guardian's crest and the Chris Pratt looking helmet. Love that look. Big fan of that one.
I don't know if I've gotten that one. I have two Star-Lord ones. One I found, one that was just, aside from the default one that was added at the start of the game. And I just continued using the default one. And I'll be interested to see if I go to the Guardians 1 look. Because I switched Groot to Guardians 1 from 2014 as well as Rocket. And like what you said, the Rocket outfits are pretty much the same. I think there's like slightly more detail in the Guardians 1 with like little ribbing or whatever. But aside from that, they're pretty similar.
I did get the Groot one, and I didn't try it out, but I looked at the preview, and honestly, I was kind of not loving the MCU Groot look compared to the game one. I just kind of like how the game Groot is very chunky, and he's got like the cybernetic harness on him. I think it looks kind of nice, honestly.
Yeah, I do like the designs of these Guardians. Like their default designs, I think after like settling in with them, I think I really enjoy them.
Yeah, definitely. Like I love the Star-Lord helmet in this game. I really like that a lot. The main thing is just the jacket is an adjustment for me. I've bounced between some outfits so far, stock and the Social Lord one, which I checked. I think that was a pre-order bonus, maybe. So I don't know if your game came with a code in the case or something, but
yeah, maybe. I honestly didn't check. I know you can earn even the pre-order bonus ones like at a certain point, so I'll keep an eye out.
Yeah. So I mean, we should probably talk about combat a little bit too. I kind of forgot the other half of this game. What do you think of combat? Because I think it's good, and I think I would just describe it if Uncharted or Tomb Raider was an RPG.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. I think a lot of early comparisons were Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I don't think I've played enough to really see that yet. It's obviously we haven't fleshed it out too much since we're very early on, but I think we got a hang of most of the mechanics involved in combat. Peter can use his pistols, and then he has the Guardians at his disposal with a variety of different combat maneuvers that they have. All the Guardians right now only have the one perk that they can use, and it seems like there's a whole tree for each Guardian that has, I think they can get up to like 4 different moves that you could use at one time. So I think that's a really cool mechanic. I like using a sort of like buddy system in combat. I wish like maybe you do later in the game, but it seems like you only have Peter's pistols at his disposal, and I wish that was a little bit more in depth. Like I don't know, a weapon wheel or an ability wheel that wasn't just shooting pistols and reloading them and using your guardians as like a supplement. I wish it was a little bit more than that, but I think it is certainly very fun so far.
Yeah, so as far as I know, I'm pretty sure Peter's, at least in the comics, his blasters are like elemental guns. So I think, based off of some preview stuff, that you'll eventually be able to get different elemental attacks with his guns. So that might throw in some variety. I will say, in terms of the progression, I appreciate how it's basically skill unlocks for your equipment and not gear based like Avengers. And I think it's interesting because Peter's, outside of his equipment level up of like, oh, your reload time is faster or you can hover longer. His like super abilities, it looks like there's only 4 for him, and there's about 4 for each other guardian, and you use your skill points that you're getting through combat to unlock those abilities. So I'm wondering if you could invest like all your skill points in Peter early to have his whole base arsenal for supers early in the game, and then as time goes on, if you're spending the skill points you're earning to unlock other abilities for Drax or for Rocket, or if they have their own individual XP meters that they're earning through combat scenarios. Too early to tell, but
yeah, to me it seemed that everyone just had the same like XP that was just earnable. So like if I have 2 XP points with Peter, that means Rocket will too, and you can just spend, I think you just like progress that way, like
gotcha.
everyone progresses at the same time. I could be wrong, but it seemed that way, but I guess we'll find out.
Sure. In terms of the Final Fantasy VII comparison, though, like I definitely see what people were talking about. I've only had one encounter with the full team at my disposal, and just I think the rhythm of it, of getting my shots in, pulling back, looking at the field, having Drax do this thing, having Groot tie this person down, then Rocket does his bomb to get the tied down people. From that angle, I can see where the 7 remake conversation comes into play, but I do think it is like how Pokemon's a JRPG, you know? It's like, oh yeah, it's like entry level. That type of concept, but stripped down to its most essential elements and a little less hardcore.
Yeah, totally. I think we were going into this game with the expectation it would be like a popcorn game, and it very much is. Like, It's nothing too overwhelming. Something I really like about the skills in particular is that, like what you said, it's just 4 skills, and like that's kind of it. And it's not very overwhelming, and the upgrades is just one list that you have from the start, and you kind of go through and read them and decide in your mind which ones you kind of want to focus on. And it's very almost relaxing in that sense, where there is like games like Deathloop where I got in and it was completely overwhelmed at first, and eventually I got the hang of it. But this, I did not feel overwhelmed like at all, and I think it really does a good job of just sort of at the very start, like it's very much an easy process of learning what this game is all about. So I do appreciate that so far.
How you liking the use of the soundtrack so far?
I love it. One of the first things I did when you get to walk around on the Milano, I went up to the radio and just sort of flipped through all the different songs. I put on the Blue Oyster Cult song that was in there, and there's a just great list, I think, of very like Guardians inspired, 80s inspired songs. So it's really good stuff.
Yeah, I like that it's subdued so far. It's not super in your face the way the movies use their soundtracks, but I imagine there's going to be set pieces throughout the game that prioritize one track over something else. But yeah, I do like the selection they have for sure, and I appreciate that it's seemingly being reserved for either like a huddle up moment or future set pieces.
Yeah, it seems like the huddle moment is similar to the Metal Gear Solid 5 helicopter situation where you can like set that theme, I believe. I've only used the huddle once, so I haven't really got to mess around with that.
Well, is there anything we haven't touched on yet about the early hours of Guardians of the Galaxy that's burning in your mind that you want to talk about before we move on and reconvene for more Guardians talk next week?
Not really. I don't have too much to say about Guardians yet just because I haven't played too much, but honestly, so far so good. The dialogue is fun. The visuals are very surprisingly good. Like I thought this would be a pretty game, but not as pretty as this ended up being. And the combat is pretty much dumb fun, which was the expectation going in, and it certainly met that. So yeah, having a good time so far.
Yeah, dude, that art direction is pretty phenomenal. Like that first area you run your first mission in is kind of gorgeous. Like it looks great.
Yeah, I'm glad you got it on the Series S.
Yeah.
That was a good call.
Yeah, because I'm curious for the Digital Foundry video breakdown.
Same.
I think I don't know if it's running at like unlocked frame rate for me or if it's like locked at something, but it hasn't been dipping or anything, and it looks very, very nice. So I'm happy. I'm content. I will say, if you're a Marvel fan, I would recommend you buy this over Avengers at this point, easily, like pretty easily, because it seems like everybody who wanted Avengers to be what it wasn't, this is the game that they wanted Avengers to be.
I'm sure at the end of this will be the better single player experience. Like, obviously we haven't beaten the game yet, but just the way that they've been marketing this in the early hours so far, it seems like if you want to enjoy a solid, I think a lot of people have been saying 15 to 20. If you want a 15 to 20 hour experience that is Marvel inspired, I think this is probably the game to do that with.
Agreed. Well, meanwhile, got some interesting things to talk about, Jack.
Yes.
Let's ramp up in terms of the severity of things to talk about.
Okay.
First up, I didn't read this, but Robert Downey Jr. put out like a 1,000-word thank you letter to the Marvel fan base and the Marvel world, as just thanking everybody for the support and his run as Tony Stark. Very wholesome.
Yeah, that's very nice. I also didn't read it, but I'm sure he made an allusion to I Love You 3000.
Oh, absolutely. I bet he signed off with that.
Yeah.
Or maybe he signed off with an I Am Iron Man. I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, quite honestly, who else can be Iron Man? He's kind of that guy. Like, he owns that. Similar to, I guess not that similar, but Michael Keaton, like, owns being Batman. Like, he said he did, like, the graduating speech for, you know how a lot of celebrities do that at, like, colleges, like, their guest speaker or whatever. He signed off being like, and remember, I'm Batman. Like, that's just kind of him. Mm-hmm. So, but I think Robert Downey Jr. is like capital Iron Man. So, good for him.
For sure. We got some new photos from Entertainment Weekly of Spider-Man No Way Home. I didn't look at all of them, but get a good look at Doc Ock. Like a really good look at Doc Ock.
Yeah, it seemed that the photo they showed was, maybe I'm wrong, but the trailer that showed Doc Ock, there was some CGI de-aging going on. And the photo that they showed didn't seem like that was the case. It seemed like it was just Alfred Molina. Like, on-set photo taken or, like, pre-de-aging. And I think it looked really good.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, Jack, if these photos are what it's going to look like in the movie, and they might have just done some, like, Marvel trickery in the trailer. Like, did they throw a CG Doc Ock in there? Because when he actually says, "Hello, Peter," he's got Toby's head in his claws or something. Like, I don't know, because this looks good. Like, on set, he looks really good. And I did not realize until we discussed that CG wasn't what Alfred Molina looked like, because I haven't seen a picture of him in at least 5 years. So
Yeah, I didn't think the trailer Doc Ock looked all that good, in my opinion. I think it was like the Uncanny Valley situation. And I saw Dune on like the biggest screen imaginable, and they played the trailer for this, and I saw him in the IMAX glory, and I'm like, oh yeah, he didn't look all that good, but the picture for sure, he looks great in this. And something a lot of people have been latching onto is the color of his arms. Have you seen this discourse?
I have.
Yeah, they're red and gold. What else is red and gold in the MCU?
Good old Iron Man.
Yeah. What's the deal with this?
I don't know. Is the next villain origin of Peter Parker in the MCU Tony's dunce arms?
Could be.
They weren't too happy with the way that he treated them for too long, and then they evolved, because they do have the three-prong claws on them, right?
True.
What if that's actually what it is, Jack?
I think that's it. Now, I think this is just a coincidental situation. Unless the only thing I can think of is the characters being brought in aren't like, that's not the Raimi Doc Ock. That is a variant of Doc Ock, which I think would be disappointing. But who got his arms from the variant of Tony Stark in his universe? That's the only thing I could think of. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, I think everyone that we're going to see is actually the characters we saw from those movies we grew up with. And I think this is just an instance of, I don't know why those are red and gold, but they just are.
I wonder if that's the case, though, because Jamie Foxx said he wasn't going to be Blue Electro. Yeah. He's got like green and yellow. He's got the classic outfit, right?
Yeah, I do remember him saying that, which makes me nervous. Like, I don't want to see Andrew Garfield or Tobey Maguire as characters that we don't already know them as. Like, just Spider-Man, but not the Spider-Man we knew. That'd be disappointing.
I've seen this conversation a lot lately as well, Jack. It's popping back up. I don't know why, but there are people who are genuinely not believing that Tobey and Andrew are in this movie. And would you be let down if that was the case?
Oh, no. I think I would prefer that.
I think so, too.
Like, we talked about this. I remember, like, last winter we were talking about all the rumors that were going on, because this has been like the most leaked movie of all time, and it started then. And we were very apprehensive about that, and I think we still kind of are. But it seems like this is less of a Spider-Verse movie, which is sure to be coming. But I think if they're in this like as sparingly as possible, I will come out of this movie more happy than if they were in this a lot.
Yeah, like, I'm still kind of hoping it's, like, 10 minutes of the movie is them, like, if anything. But
like an Endgame Portals situation.
Sure, because I think in that scenario that you laid out of, like, if they're just variants, I think that would be the case if they weren't in the movie. So I feel like it's a really tricky thing to judge going in. It doesn't help that very recently John Watts called this like Spider-Man Endgame. So yeah. It's weird, dude. This is the weirdest Marvel movie of recent memory, I think, when it comes to the pre-release lead up.
Yeah, they're holding a lot of stuff back. It seems like if those Spider-Man are in this movie, they obviously are not talking about that. If they are, I hope they do not talk about that. I don't see that being likely. I have a feeling after Eternals is out and about, they're just going to release another trailer with a tease of them. But I would love if they just never talk about them being in the movie until it's out.
Yeah, well, apparently, I didn't look into this too much, but in that Entertainment Weekly spread for the movie, uh, they might have confirmed two more villains. Did you hear about this?
Yeah, there was an arm that looked like Sandman's arm, and a design next to it looked like Sandman's shirt, as well as a circle that just looked like Mysterio's head. So it seems possible that they're either in that or the spread was just made by an Empire employee that was just making references to Spider-Man.
Yeah, I also heard Lizard as well.
Yeah.
So,
We there was like a potential glimpse at Lizard in the first trailer.
mm-hmm.
I remember, so that's certainly possible too.
Yeah, so wait and see what's up with this. Maybe it's going to leak more. Who's to say? But uh, while we're on the subject of Spider-Man, the next step of this escalation is what I'm now calling Spidey Watch, because Tom Holland, he's crying on set. He's feeling like it's the end of an era. Is Tom out of the MCU? There's been a couple quotes that have been floating around recently. One you sent to me, another one I saw separately, I think yesterday. The first one that I found was very interesting was the one you shared with me, that in 2019, when it was announced that Spider-Man was leaving the MCU, Tom Holland apparently went to Amy Pascal's house, and we have a quote here from him talking about that day. He said, quote, "On the day that the announcement happened I would no longer be in the MCU, I just drove over to Amy Pascal's house and sat with her by her pool, and we sat there for hours just chatting and pitching movies. How would we do a film without Marvel? Does Peter Parker fall through a portal and then he's in the Venom world? Or do we do a Kraven the Hunter film?" Interesting. Your perspective, I like a lot. That it's just cool to see Tom Holland be so committed to the role. But
Yeah.
Do you think that he's maybe responsible for these other movies that are happening now because of this?
No, I don't think Tom Holland is responsible. Like, I think Amy Pascal is certainly listening, but Sony is trying to milk Spider-Man as much as possible after the MCU Sony Spider-Man were so successful, and now the Venom movies are so successful. To a lesser extent, Into the Spider-Verse, I don't think that was as successful as they wanted it to be, but definitely like critically well received. But yeah, I think Sony is just like full bore Spider-Man right now. And to me, this quote to me speaks more of like Tom Holland, more so than I feel like a lot of actors working in like superhero movies, is like very much dedicated to that role. Like that is basically a part of him right now. It seems like he's going to be playing the character for quite some time.
Yeah, which is very, very good, very hopeful to hear his perspective on this. And in light of everything recently, like that, I think was also an Entertainment Weekly article recently that had those quotes about him on set and their last day of shooting. But separately, Kevin Feige had something to say about all this. Just talking about the 2019 travesty in the Marvel fandom when this was going down. He said, quote, "I don't anticipate us going through that emotional roller coaster," specifically talking to what happened with Spider-Man, "or putting fans through that emotional roller coaster again." So it sounds like Spidey's in the MCU for good.
Yeah, that is honestly kind of surprising. I think I was coming out of last week's episode maybe resigned to the fact we were talking about like them talking about this being the end, like hopeful that it would still be in the MCU, but kind of resigned to the fact that Sony might have its hooks in Spider-Man now, and Spider-Man might just exist, kind of like what Tom Holland was talking about. Like he falls through a portal and he's just in the Sony universe now, which like that I think would be disappointing. At the same time, it'd be nice to have Spider-Man kind of on his own again, but I like this Spider-Man being in the MCU a lot, actually. So it's nice that we kind of have that reassurance right now, at least.
Yeah, and I think also you and I have had this conversation before. This is something I've thought for a long time. Like, Marvel's always playing the long game with the MCU, and I think that there is plenty of room for Spider-Man to be on his own within the MCU, like Iron Man was for all of his movies. I just think that time is probably going to come with his next trilogy or the next arc for Spider-Man, because there was that immediate, oh, we can finally see Spider-Man interact with all these Marvel superheroes. And for some people, that got old very fast, but I would be inclined to believe that that gimmick was for a trilogy, you know? So
Right.
I would like to see him be on his own a little more. I think that is still a real possibility. Just obviously not for No Way Home.
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the things about the John Watts trilogy that got old really quickly was Peter either being with a mentor or thinking about a mentor. Uh, I think a lot of people like Spider-Man figuring it out on his own, and I have a good feeling that's what the next trilogy will be. If it is like a more mature Spider-Man dealing with more mature things, I have a feeling it's probably going to be, I guess, similar to like the Raimi or the Mark Webb Spider-Man movies.
Agreed.
Which would be good.
And speaking of what's going on with the future of Sony's Marvel movies, they did announce pretty much immediately after we recorded last week that they've locked down 2 new dates. So when Marvel's MCU reshuffling happened, Sony has claimed June 23rd, 2023 and October 6th, 2023. Now, what do you think those are? Because I think I got 2 locked and loaded answers.
This is for the Sony Spider-Man universe?
Yes, Sony's Marvel
SSU?
universe, yes.
Would these be Sony Marvel joint productions, similar to Spider-Man? Or just like the Morbius movie?
I think it would be anything that is in association with Marvel.
Gotcha.
From a Sony production house. So that could be a MCU thing or it could be a standalone Sony project.
Okay, why don't you hit me with yours? Because I have no clue.
Okay, so June 23rd, 2023, I think we're going to continue the trend of a Spider-Man movie every 2 years. I think that's Spider-Man 4, new trilogy, St. Peter, Tom Holland. And October 6th, I'm sticking with the trend. That's Venom. That's Venom 3.
In 2 years, yeah. I think that probably makes sense.
So, it's just based off the trends. You know, we got Venom pretty quick. We're doing Spidey every 2 years. I don't see why we'd shake that. So,
here's my guess. I agree with your Venom. I think that's probably a lock. I think the June, you said, or July release?
June 23rd.
I think that's Spider-Man 4, Tobey Maguire, directed by Sam Raimi.
I love that, but is there any reality where they don't release that movie on a 4th of July weekend?
Yeah, but I think you could say the same about
Sure.
any Spider-Man movie. I think that's close enough.
I
don't think that will happen, but if it does happen, that's probably like a 2025 movie, maybe. Yeah,
because we can absolutely probably have more of a weighted conversation about that in time, but a Tobey Spider-Man 4 or an Andrew Amazing Spider-Man 3 I think are on the table, and we could probably see both if not both this decade, I'd imagine.
That'd be cool.
We're continuing to ramp up, Jack. Eternals is the lowest MCU rated film on Rotten Tomatoes right now. Since writing the docket has dipped, it is now 63%, not 64%.
Yeah, that is kind of bonkers. I honestly was really expecting this to be amongst the highest, given the quality of the director and what you most previously did. And just the visuals of this movie looked pretty spectacular and looked really unique to what we've seen in the MCU already. So we were texting about this. This makes me more interested to see the movie because I want to know what's going on with this movie. Why is this sitting as the lowest rated MCU movie right now? It seems very like this. It seems like a disassociation with what I've seen in the trailers so far, which look pretty amazing. And like, I can't believe this is sitting under Thor, the Dark World right now. That is just wild to me.
So I find it very hard to believe that Chloe Zhao went from Nomadland to this in terms of reception. So, like, I'm not one to question a critic, but, like, do outlets have, like, a specific Marvel person at this point for review? Like, does the New York Times have a Marvel guy to review the MCU stuff, and does that Marvel person expect a certain thing out of the MCU, and this isn't that? Is that what's going on here? Like, we go in expecting it to be quippy MCU, and it's not that, and maybe that doesn't work for some people? Or is this just a mid-movie? I don't know, but the only genuine criticism I've heard, and I haven't, like, looked into it too much, is that it's slow. But I personally kind of like when movies are slow. We can only wait and see, but I'm very surprised by this, and I don't know where or when the other shoe will drop about all of this.
Yeah, I'm interested to see the audience reaction. It's always really interesting to see the sometimes discord between the critics' reaction and the audience reaction. Sometimes one's higher, one's lower, so we'll see what's up with that. But yeah, this honestly took me by surprise. I was thinking this would be like in the 90s, and this would be amongst like the higher rated Marvel movies. But yeah, and again, this just makes me that much more interested in seeing what is going on with this movie. And I think like at the end of the day, if this is just a mid movie, maybe there was some studio oversight that like Chloe Zhao couldn't really have as much control as she might have wanted to, which I'm sure a lot of directors face with the MCU. So maybe that has something to do with it. But yeah, we'll see in a couple weeks.
I mean, I thought we were kind of beyond that at this point when you look at stuff like Guardians of the Galaxy with James Gunn or Taika and Ragnarok and the next Thor movie. Like, it seems like ever since the Edgar Wright thing, Marvel's kind of understood that they're better off if they let their directors have a room to flex. So, like, yeah, I hope it wasn't that, because she's a great director, and I hope she wasn't restrained by anything beyond the, like, you gotta have one line about Thanos here or something like that, like.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm really curious. I want to know what's up, because I was with you. I was fully expecting this to be like one of the best films in the MCU library,
Yeah, that's another thing I noticed at the IMAX screening I went to. This looked insane on IMAX, and it was a delight to watch. Like, I was actually blown away looking at this trailer. So I think at the very least that will be consistent to the movie. But yeah.
And I'm still going in hoping and hoping with my expectations set at it being that level of, wow, this is a really, really great addition that makes a lot of the other MCU movies look like what they are,
Yeah. I was looking up Rotten Tomatoes for Shang-Chi, the most recent MCU movie, and that's at 92 right now. So,
jeez.
Yeah. Man, my hype was very high for the Eternals, and it still is in like a very different way. in like more in like what is going on with this movie. Like 63, that's very low for an MCU movie. So like we usually don't really get the stinkers with the MCU. I'm not saying that this is, it's interesting that that's where it's sitting right now.
I hope it's just misunderstood and it's not like a mess. I hope that's the issue here, honestly. But
yeah, we'll see.
We will. Last up, we've been ramping up to this horrible travesty, Jack. The Quantumania logo's out there. Have you seen this shit?
Yeah, and honestly, it looks like a mistake. Like, this doesn't look intentional. Right? Like, what is going on?
It looks like the Sacred Timeline from the Watchtower or whatever not Kang, He Who Remains was in, right?
Mm-hmm.
It looks like those splinters. It looks bad. It looks real bad.
Yeah, like, we've seen the regular Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. I'm looking at a comparison of the three. There's, like, the 2020 version, the 2021 version, which looks slightly different, and then this abomination. I don't know what this is. I think you're right. Like, this could be, like, a reference to the Sacred Timeline. Like, it probably is, but no way does that show up on a poster. Like, it looks like a misprint from another language.
If it does, Jack, it's going to be so confusing because you're going to have, like, gamers love using the grandma thing, right? You're going to see a grandma go and be like, can I get a ticket for Ant-Man and the Wasp? Ooh.
Yeah, Ant-Man and the starts speaking alien tongue. Like, it looks very weird. And, like, my initial thought was, oh, did that like, did the poster, like, misprint? Like, did the ink mess up halfway through this job? It looks very weird.
I'll say I appreciate and respect it, but that's a bad move, and they shouldn't put that on the official stuff, I think. Like, if that's just for the set and for the shooting stuff, cool. But that's a choice.
Yeah, I don't want to see this on a movie poster, for sure.
No. Well, that is it for everything Marvel in the world going on right now. So why don't we get to our Spidey review segment for the week? The Amazing Spider-Man from 2012.
Oh my god. This is almost a 10-year-old movie?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Why don't we start the way we started with the Tobey movies? Jack, what's your history with The Amazing Spider-Man?
My history with Amazing Spider-Man is relatively boring. I think the biggest thing for me when the reboot was announced was the first-person camera perspective of him, which we see in the movie, of him, Spider-Man, running on the roof, using his webs, jumping over to a building that has like kind of like mirror windows in a way, and you can see his outfit. I think that was a really cool announcement for this movie. What about you?
Yeah, I remember that teaser footage as well. That was really, really fun. I really loved this movie when it came out. I think I saw it twice in theaters, and the only other time I ever did multiple repeats up to that point was earlier that year with Avengers. So I was riding the Marvel high. I was like, Avengers, great. Amazing Spider-Man, great. It'd be amazing if one day they would cross over.
Oh man, I remember those rumors.
Mm-hmm.
That was fun.
How the Oscorp Tower was supposed to be in the Avengers skyline, but they ran out of time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have a huge fondness for the Amazing Spider-Man. I, at the time, was a big defender of it. I thought people were being too nitpicky with it's too dark. We're doing his origin again, which I understand why those are valid complaints, but like, it's a Spider-Man movie, you know. I think starting out, they only did Uncle Ben one other time. You know, how many times have we seen Batman's parents die? Like, we could have done it a second time. It was maybe too close to the original take for them to have it and not feel like it was going super hard in a different direction. But all that aside, I did really love the movie when it came out, and in my mind, I've always thought very highly, in a way, of The Amazing Spider-Man 1.
Yeah. I think I came out of this movie thinking it was pretty good, like when I saw it in the movies, but I don't really think I saw it all too much afterwards. And same with its sequel. It's not like a blind spot for me, but I don't think I really held these movies in that high regard. And it probably was the comparisons to the Raimi movies, which were very nostalgic for me. But yeah, I think I came out of this one in my 2012 brain thinking that was fine.
Sure. So on a rewatch, how do you feel? Is it still this is fine? What's up?
So I watched it in 2018 when Kind of Funny was doing their Spidey interview, and I came out of it like a lot more positive than I originally did. And I think with this rewatch, I've sort of come down a little bit. I think this movie is still good, but like there are some really good differences in this movie and some choices that they made compared to Raimi's take on the origin story that I really liked. And there are some other choices that I really don't like all that much. The tone, I like the levity of it, but there is the direction of some characters I think is a little strange, and the villain I think is kind of meh. So at the end of it, like the combination of everything at the end of the movie, I think it was fairly good, but I wouldn't really say this is amongst my favorite of the Spider-Man movies. What about you?
Yeah, so I haven't seen it in a very long time. I think the last time I saw it in full was probably leading up to Amazing Spider-Man 2. And back then, still really loved it. This time, I thought it was good. Like, I definitely have not as much love for it as I once did, but I do think that it is a little overhated, I think, because in terms of the origin, I really genuinely, I really, really enjoy the way they string along Peter Parker at the first third of the movie and the build up to him becoming Spider-Man. I really, really like how that's handled here. And then, like, I think everything else is just kind of a plateau, maybe. Like, we build and build and build up to him becoming Spider-Man, and then it just kind of flatlines. Like, not in a bad way. It just never continues that momentum that they had going for them that I think was pretty good up until the suit gets created and everything, and then he helps the kid. Like, everything after that's like, yeah, this is good. It's solid. But I do really, really love the build-up in this movie.
Sure. I think for me, the best part was, or the part that I liked that was in like stark contrast to the Raimi Spider-Man movies we've seen is the relationship with Peter and Gwen. Like, pretty much instantly you buy that, and it's not this very strange relationship where they've known each other for their entire lives, but also they're just meeting each other for the first time. And it's just like a very playful back and forth between Gwen and Peter, and they sort of just like each other from the instant because they're kids, and a lot of times that's just what happens with kids. And it's really fun. I like pretty much every scene that they're in together. I love Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield like as a movie couple. I think it really worked in this movie. I'd say I didn't love Peter on its own, but we can get into that. But yeah, the relationship for me is in stark contrast to Peter and MJ in the previous movies, and in the best possible way.
Yeah, I think this movie gets not carried by their relationship, but I do think it's a core element of The Amazing Spider-Man that is kind of essential to the story and the character of Peter Parker, where it was also a core element in Spider-Man 1, and it did not hit there. You know, like, they kept trying real hard to make Toby and Kirsten have some kind of chemistry. They rest a lot of Peter's motivations in the first Spider-Man movie from Raimi on that relationship, and it just doesn't work for me. And here, I feel like the motivations of Peter and a lot of stuff going on in the story doesn't rest on the relationship with the girl as much, but it just still elevates the movie and characters, even though it's not a focus, I think.
Yeah, I think in the Raimi movies, that relationship was very distracting, and it was supposed to be like a core tenet. And in this movie, like, it is still a big part of Peter's character, but it just makes so much sense. Like is very much like peanut butter and chocolate. It is not distracting at all. Like it works very well, and I think it sets them up for the sequel very well too. Like it just you kind of want to see more of them at the end of the movie, which I think is a really good sign.
Definitely. You said you don't like Peter. Why don't we get into that now?
Yeah. So it's not the thing that everyone complains about with Andrew Garfield. Like, yes, he's very handsome and whatnot, and like people say he's too cool. I don't think he's cool in this. I think he's just really weird, and he's also really high the entire time. Like, the direction with his character really confuses me. Like, he stumbles like every few words. Like just the way he speaks is so odd. Like, I think, like what you were saying last week, Sam Raimi's interpretation of Peter is like the 1960s nerd, and this interpretation of Peter is like a modern, awkward nerd, which I don't know. It seemed very strange to me. The way he spoke in this was just like completely bizarre. I couldn't really get behind his character in this.
So I want to hear what you think of this specific scene, because I do appreciate that he doesn't feel like a caricature of a dork sweater vest sort of vibe that Toby has, because it came out in the early 2010s, and the loner kid, or the kid that gets picked on in high school, is different now than it was in the 60s. So I appreciate that they go for that sort of like hipster wallflower skater guy thing. And I think Peter still has like a lot of intelligence that he actively uses in this movie that I'm surprised is present. And a lot of that, I think, comes down to the scene that I want to ask you about, where he's meeting Dr. Connors, and he's sort of just like kind of oblivious to the tone that Connors has in his home, and he's just sort of very focused on the science and this problem that he thinks he solved, and is very proud of himself, but still kind of like timid and stumbling over it. Like, I think that is sort of like what I look at when I am trying to figure out what direction they went with Peter in this amazing series. And to me, that interaction is a good example of like the direction of what a nerd is for Andrew Garfield and Mark Webb, I guess.
Sure. I think I love the smart and like inventive angle they took with Peter in this one. Like that seems more in line with kind of how his character was in the comics. Like he was the smart science type guy. And Peter in the Maguire movies, or the Tobey Maguire movies, are more, he was smart, but you didn't really get the same sense that he was on the level that this Peter is. And I love that about this character. Like, I think that's a really good choice. For me, it all comes down to the delivery of how Andrew Garfield is delivering his lines. Like, he seems like he's like hiding something. Like, that's what I'm saying. He seemed high like all the time. Seems like he's like trying to like avoid speaking, or like just trying to brush past speaking. And like, I get that he's trying to be like this modern awkward teenager, but I think the direction for his character was just completely wacky. And it was to the point where I was like, we haven't quite gotten to like the definitive Spider-Man yet. Like we're still stumbling, because obviously Toby had some very strange line deliveries throughout his run, and now with this movie we get the same with Andrew in a little bit of a different way. But yeah,
I definitely see what you're saying, and I think that is an interesting pillar of Andrew Garfield's performance, because you have that angle for Peter Parker that does feel like definitely nerd, definitely awkward. Maybe it's not hitting fully, or it feels a little awkward, like not in the way they're going for. But when you enter in the Spider-Man part of the equation, I love his Spider-Man. I really think that he's like, in terms of just the Spidey stuff, I think he's my favorite Spidey so far.
I think he definitely has a lot more to work with in this movie, and I like the quips. Everything he does in the suit, I agree. I think is the best we've seen so far. But especially, I love the direction for Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man in particular to just be a very like typical New Yorker. Like he really hands up his New York accent. Like it just seems like there's this like stereotypical New Yorker under the mask, and I think that was in contrast to his direction for Peter Parker. I feel like the choices they made for him as Spider-Man were really solid, and it feels more like Spider-Man, honestly, compared to what we got with Tobey Maguire.
Yeah, and I think maybe the split between Peter and Spidey in this movie and the direction of the performances might have been a bit extreme on the Peter side to just really showcase that Spider-Man is where Peter's most confident and comfortable. But from memory, I feel like they balanced that a little better in the sequel in terms of what you're talking about with Peter. So
Yeah, I kind of feel like I liked the sequel more in a way, which I know that a lot of people hate that movie for good reasons, but at least maybe the Peter realization. Because, like, I don't remember disliking Andrew Garfield as Peter. Like, I remember, obviously, his Spider-Man was better, but I feel like you're probably right. They probably do iron that out in the sequel.
yeah. Plus, it's a little bit of an apples and oranges thing, because, like, Peter in the Raimi movies is obviously adapting the Amazing Spider-Man comics, and a lot of this origin of Peter Parker in this take is the Ultimate Spider-Man approach, which is a bit darker, is a bit more serious. Peter is a bit more modern. He's got a more modern haircut, so that's everything you gotta know. So, like, it's slightly a different origin point that I think sometimes people forget about. But yeah, compared to the overall package, it's a Spider-Man movie, dude. So like I go in wanting Spider-Man, and I think out of all the movies so far, the best Spider-Man stuff comes from this one in terms of the quippiness and the action and the science elements and the ingenuity. It just feels more like a realized person who's a superhero, where Toby's just kind of there, kind of stiff, maybe a good one-liner here or there, but does have a good heartfelt hero moment. This has the heartfelt hero moment and the other elements that I felt Toby lacked.
Yeah, I think anytime Andrew Garfield's in the suit, I think I like him more than Toby in the suit. I also really like the choice to have his parents be like a very integral part of his character in this movie and like of his origin, which I feel like we don't really see all that much in like comics or games or really anything. Like that's almost rare compared to Aunt May and Uncle Ben, so I appreciated their inclusion in this.
Do you remember the marketing for this movie?
In what way?
The tagline of like the teaser poster and stuff.
No, what did it say?
The untold story begins, and it was because of that intro scene of his parents.
Interesting.
But yeah, I think also what you're talking about, I believe in the Ultimate Comics, Richard and Mary Parker were agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and I think that's why they have this secret business going on behind the scenes in this one and in two. But yeah, it's very interesting because, you know, it's weird that a character like Batman, the parents are so central, and Spider-Man is also an orphan, but it's about his uncle, and we never really talk about the parents. So it is cool that they bring up here, I think.
Do you recall this movie having way more product placement than it ended up having?
Yeah, dude.
And I mean, that might be setting us up for the sequel to have a lot, which I know it does.
You're right.
But I thought it was this movie. Like, we get the Bing, which is very distracting because who uses Bing? But, like, I think if Google was in there, I don't think anyone would really care. But I remember this movie being, like, ridiculous with the amount of product placement going on.
Yeah. It. I think the thing that made me think was there was a Vio laptop, and when I saw that, I was like, oh, this is the first time that they've like focused in on a brand. So that was a little jarring. But yeah, now that I'm thinking of it, I don't know how many other options or elements and scenes there were of product placement. So like Sony does that a lot. I think also maybe his phone was a Sony phone, but I don't think they ever like zoomed in on a brand or a logo. So unfortunately, I think you're correct. I do remember it being particularly egregious in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. But thankfully, it wasn't too distracting. So when it comes to the Spidey suit,
Yes.
I remember this was divisive at the time. What do you think of the suit?
I don't hate it. Like, I think, like what you're saying, this movie is definitely, like, a lot of the audience reaction is overreaction, I think. And the suit definitely is part of that. I think it's fine. I appreciate the choice to make it look like very distinct from both the comics and the Raimi movies. Like, I don't think this suit can find any comparisons in the comics. It's very distinct. So I appreciate that. It's not something that I'm very fond about. Like, I think it's fine. It's certainly a choice to have like the sort of sunglass inspired like visors or like the eye pieces. That's fine, but I think I appreciate the effort here. I don't love this suit, but it's certainly very different. What about you?
I like the suit a lot. I love the way they work in like the blue and red on the gauntlets a lot. I thought that was a good choice. Love the long spiders on the front and back. I do like the orange lenses. I prefer probably the Amazing Spider-Man 2 suit by a good margin. But I do really like how this was just sort of a really solid new take on the Spider-Man suit. And I love the texture of it.
Yeah, I do. I think you make a good point with the texture. Like it feels like you feel that and you know exactly what that feel is like. But yeah, I think like I was swinging around in Spider-Man yesterday, like I was saying, and I put on the Amazing Spider-Man suit, swung around for a little bit, and then I put the Raimi suit on because I was like, yeah, that's that's what I want to see right now.
How do you feel about Uncle Ben in this?
I think Martin Sheen is a very underrated Uncle Ben.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like him a lot. I think he has a more like personal connection to Peter. Like you feel like they actually have conversations and things like that. He's, I feel like, in the movie longer. I think the Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi Uncle Ben was in the movie for like 2 or 3 scenes, and Martin Sheen just has more to work with and has more time to develop with Peter. He's also really funny. Like he makes the comment about Gwen being on the computer, which is silly. Yeah, I think he's like, I love the original Uncle Ben, but I think Martin Sheen has just more time to work in this movie, and he becomes a more empathetic character. So I think we should be respecting Martin Sheen's work in this.
You made a great case for it, and I fully agree. I think he's really good as Uncle Ben. I love that he gets to hang around for a while. And while the emotional performance of the actors in Sam Raimi's Uncle Ben scene, I think, is still incredibly impactful, where this one is just kind of, it works, you know. I do think that him being in there for so long works really, really well. Also, Sally Field's Aunt May, really like that a lot. I love her role in the film. The way she plays off Peter and Ben is very charming. And yeah, I really enjoy the relationships between like every character in this movie, I think. Outside of, I guess, Lizard and Spider-Man. But like Peter and his family, Peter and Gwen, Peter and Dr. Connors even. I really like all of that. Gwen and her dad. Like, everybody has some really good back and forth, I think.
Yeah, you like Dennis Leary in this movie?
I do you?
Yeah, he's cool. Have a nice Boston Worcester connection with Dennis Leary.
Hell yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah, I really do like him in the movie, though, and I think it's fun to have him sort of be the, not civilian, but like the normal person sort of antagonist to Spider-Man, just because they didn't want to do Jameson again, I imagine.
No, he's like the Gordon to Spider-Man's Batman, you know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I really do like him being in here and having that sort of like authority figure, disapproval role. And his arc with Peter and Gwen I like a lot as well. But
yeah, I think that works a lot, and I think, again, I feel like it was a pretty good setup for what we get in the sequel. I feel like the sequel deals with the ramifications of Peter's actions and the promise he breaks, from what I remember, pretty well.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to ask you this. When he says leave Gwen out of it, I feel like Peter kind of overcorrects, maybe, because, like, he never said, like, don't date my daughter, you know? Yeah. It's like, just keep her out of the Spider-Man stuff, dude. Like, I don't know. That hit for me last night, and I was like, I feel like we might be able to avoid a lot of the sequel problems if he just kind of... Because he says he's going to disobey anyway. He just feels guilty about it later, right?
Yeah, it seems like Peter was like, oh, I guess I'll never see her again in my entire life. Which is very dramatic. And I get where they were going for, but yeah, maybe a different line of dialogue or something.
I also... Listen, I've never seen a Wanted poster in my life, so maybe this is just me being nitpicky, but I thought it was very funny that Uncle Ben's murderer on this Wanted poster was wanted for questioning.
I didn't notice that.
I was like, he's not wanted for manslaughter? Like, what? Very strange, but maybe that's just how Wanted posters are.
Yeah, and I thought it was a little odd. I thought I remembered this movie, like, him eventually finding that, or maybe I forgot this from this viewing. I thought he found the killer and, like, just decided not to get his revenge on him, but is that threadline just completely lost in this movie?
I think so. Maybe it's a deleted scene or something, but I kind of like that it just fades away, personally.
Like, I think I would too if they sort of grappled with that a little bit more. Like, I appreciate how, similar to Raimi's Spider-Man, like, his first sort of actions as Spider-Man are trying to get revenge or trying to work for something for himself, like in a very selfish maneuver. It would have just been nice for him to grapple with that at the end and walk away from it, or at least say something about that. I don't think we really got that.
Yeah, like, you're looking for he takes the poster off the wall, crumples it up or something.
Yeah, like he visually walks away, or
sure,
says something like, I started doing this for X reason, and now I've come to realize it's for Y.
Mm-hmm. I do really like how we get to sort of stew with that motivation for Peter here, where the selfish act in Spider-Man is him doing the wrestling scene, and then immediately, being like, no, I have to be responsible. I do like how it's kind of messy here, and it is Peter kind of taking a while. And even when he makes the Spider-Man suit, he still made it with the intent to hunt down this dude for revenge. Like, I really, really like that. And it's not really until he has that conversation with Captain Stacy and then helps the kid on the bridge, which I think is maybe one of the best Spider-Man scenes in a movie.
That is a really good scene. The back and forth and, like, very quickly realizing, like, taking off the mask would do it. I think that's certainly something that we've only seen with Andrew Garfield doing that. I think that was a really cool maneuver. I liked that a lot.
Yeah, man. I'll see how I feel again next week, but like I really think that Andrew Garfield is often overlooked and was sort of shafted when it comes to being Spider-Man. It feels like he was made for this role because he just fits into this suit and like the characteristics of Spider-Man, in my opinion, incredibly well.
So far, the better Spider-Man, and on par or worse as a Peter Parker, in my opinion, to Tobey Maguire.
I can get with that. I feel the same, I think.
Like, I feel like there is no question that he is the better man under the suit, but I was not vibing with his Peter Parker performance.
Sure. I think, given the different direction, the things that don't work for some people, I'm a bit more okay with, but it definitely feels at times like the movie is a bit messy when it comes to that stuff. So to me, it seems like we've been talking a lot of positivity about this thing. So where does it fall apart for you? Does it fall apart? What's up?
Yeah, like the overriding plot once he's Spider-Man of the Lizard being the villain and the motivations there of, I guess, he needed to get the cure for Norman Osborn, and he tries it on himself, becomes a lizard, and then his motivation is just to make everyone lizards. That kind of lost it for me. Wasn't really on board with that part. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's a large part of it. Just some awkwardness throughout. Like, I didn't like him adapting to his powers. I loved Tobey Maguire's few scenes that he got, and I did not like the subway scene of like the comedic, like Three Stooges-esque hitting people with pipes, or the basketball scene where he's like jumping 1,000 feet in the air and dunking and breaking the basketball hoop. There's just a lot of weirdness to this movie that are in scenes like that.
I do, in terms of him getting used to his powers, I do like when he's skateboarding at that point and him like messing with it that way, because I feel like that would have been a more natural way for him to test his limits based off of what we see with him, because he's carrying the skateboard a lot before he gets bit. Mm-hmm. I like that scene a lot, but everything else that you just said, yeah, I handled much better by Raimi in the origin department in terms of the powers. When it comes to the Lizard, go with me here. I think he is Green Goblin without the charisma, with the motivations of Doc Ock.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Like, when it comes to the Kurt Connor stuff, I think he's solid in his motivation. And then when the Lizard personality comes in, he goes Green Goblin. And randomly deciding, no, we need to do this for the good of people. That's where the Doc Ock thing comes in. Because with Doc Ock, it was also kind of out of the blue. I think here it just feels a bit more ridiculous, because rather than making a giant sun off Manhattan, he wanted to make Manhattan the Ninja Turtles. You know?
Yeah, really silly. Love how Peter cures the genophage in this movie.
Yeah. And kind of precursor to Spider-Man PS4. We got an aerosol virus, you know?
You're right.
Yeah. I think the Lizard is like fine. I don't think he's bad. I don't think he's good. I like Kurt Connors, but Lizard as a villain is like, it's fine. He's a villain.
Yeah, he's I think really silly in this movie. Mm-hmm. I don't love Kurt Connors in this. He's kind of an asshole throughout the movie. Mm-hmm. Like I wish we did get the little bit more like Doc Ock Peter relationship that we got in Spider-Man 2. I feel like that could have made him a more interesting villain, but he's kind of he like sort of asserts his power over Peter like throughout the movie, like not letting him answer, or like being like kind of rude when Peter needs to answer his phone call. Things like that, where it's like, all right, you're not someone I necessarily want to be around. He kind of just likes Peter because of his scientific prowess and not him as a person, where I feel like it would have been nice if they had a scene together that was aside from him figuring out the science equation, which again, that's him just kind of liking him because he's smart rather than him being a nice guy.
Yeah, and I do like that Peter kind of creates his own problems in this movie too, of like him snooping into his parents' business, and then the whole theme of responsibility is basically his motivations. It's not just like the one scene at the beginning of dealing with Uncle Ben's killer. It's literally the entire villain hero dynamic in this is about power responsibility, because Peter thinks he was doing a good thing, is trying to be a good person, screw something up, and people die, get hurt because of it, people he's close to. And on that angle, I do like how Lizard is tied to Peter. I also kind of like, I kind of felt indifferent about this before, but I kind of like the idea that the Amazing Spider-Man movies are about like DNA modification more than the Raimi movies were, you know? Like, from memory, in the sequel at least, because this one is about animals cross humans, the sequel does that in a way as well, with like the birth of Electro being tied to eels. And I don't think Rhino has any Rhino DNA, but like the stuff with
you
Goblin.
Won't believe what Rhino is doing to rhinos.
But yeah, I think that's kind of cool, because it's I think there's a weird theory of like, maybe there's a deleted scene, but like Peter was genetically modified as a child to be able to be spider bred or something.
That sounds oddly familiar.
So if the angle was they wanted to have a agent that could use the spider powers to eliminate those who get out of control, if that was an angle they were going for, that would have been really cool, because they do kind of cut off that plot line early, because we never got a trilogy out of this. But
yeah, in either way, you do, I feel like on a base level that is more of a like comic reference, where I feel like in a lot in comics it was always accidents, and a lot of that happened with animals, and you get more of that for sure in these two movies.
Yeah, so I think that's fun.
Yeah, but that's good.
Is there any major stuff we haven't hit on that you want to hit on? I like the score. I like the Spider-Man theme.
I'm honestly struggling to remember the Spider-Man theme right now. I think I'm still riding the high of Danny Elfman, that maybe I'll go back and listen to it, but it didn't really jump out as much to me this go around.
Yeah, the Danny Elfman one is still number one. This is a good reinvention of a Spider-Man theme, I think, but it's way more triumphant, and I think Hans Zimmer's Spider-Man theme in the next one is better than this still.
Like, I'm waiting for the Electro plays music scene. But I think when the Spider-Man show up in No Way Home and they inevitably play their themes, I think the Danny Elfman one will pop, and then this one will come up, be like, oh yeah, that was Andrew's, that was his theme, right? Like, for me at least, just didn't stick out to me as much.
Sure, yeah. I like you brought this up earlier, but the first person cuts were a choice, and it's a choice that I like.
Yeah, I feel like that this movie is riding the parkour trend pretty hard, and I don't know, it works. I do like seeing first person Spider-Man action. It's cool.
I also like the unified New York moment with the cranes. That's kind of like the you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us, but a bit more toned down, you know?
Yeah, I think it's still really silly.
It is.
And like, they just knew that Spider-Man needed the cranes to be like that, and also like the buildings are just fine enough, whatever. It's a silly thing. It's whatever. It's just another one of those like awkward moments in this movie. It's like this is a weird choice. But yeah, it's not like reprehensible by any means, but it's definitely silly.
What do you think of the ending?
Of him breaking the promise?
Breaking the promise, yeah, him leaving off with Gwen that way, and that being the final note of the reboot.
Yeah, again, this is like I was saying earlier, I like that ending and I like how it kind of sets up their relationship for the sequel, which I think deals with this choice very well. So I think that was a very good note to leave this movie off with.
I agree. Well, oh yeah, was the swing before that or after? That was after, right?
The swing.
The final swinging scene.
I would imagine that's probably after.
Yeah, I like that too. I like a good final swing in a
Sure.
Spider-Man movie.
Sure.
Where is this fallen for you? What star ranking did you give it? Where does it rank in your Spidey ranking so far?
Yeah, I gave this a 3 out of 5. I think it's a good movie. I don't think it is really anything beyond that. Like, there are no moments in this movie that I think Spider-Man 1 is probably the better comparison. Obviously, they're both origin stories, but I think there are moments in Spider-Man 1 that I absolutely adore and love, but there really aren't too many in this movie that really, stick out to me of scenes that I really think about when I think about this movie. So I enjoyed it. It was a fun time, but it wasn't really anything beyond that for me. What about you?
So I was bouncing between 3.5 and 4. I've currently landed on a 3.5 because while I do love Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man, a good margin above Tobey, I think, like I said, the movie just kind of plateaus for me after the birth of Spider-Man car scene. And that's a bummer because I think it had really strong momentum, and I really appreciate the slow build of Peter becoming Spider-Man and getting bitten. But yeah, I think as a reboot, it's a good reboot. I think it's a good new direction. But like you're saying, there's a layer of nostalgia and level of highs that hit with Spider-Man 1 that I still have a fondness for, even though there's a lot of things I kind of prefer how they're handled in this movie. So it's a really weird choice for me between the two. But yeah, 3.5 stars. So where do you rank this? What's your updated ranking?
So at number 6 is Spider-Man 3. Number 5 is Venom. 4 is Venom Let There Be Carnage. And then this falls in at number 3. And then Spider-Man 1 is number 2. And Spider-Man 2 is number 1.
Interesting. Jack, I wanted Amazing Spider-Man to be my number 2 so badly going into this because I was scared that it was gonna lose some of its luster for me, and I don't know if it lost any of its luster, but I just think that when we did our rewatch for Spider-Man 1, there was something about it that just hit real hard for me on the rewatch. So yeah, I have the exact same ranking as you still.
Yeah, dude, I honestly was going into this movie with the expectation it would be better than Spider-Man 1, but maybe it is the close proximity of us watching those movies back to back where I feel like Spider-Man 1 is still that solid, really solid Spider-Man movie. Like Spider-Man origin story. And there's a lot of awkwardness and silliness to that movie, of course, and there's a lot of stuff that doesn't work about that, but on the whole, I think it is a really good, like if you have to sit someone down and give someone the origin to Spider-Man, I feel like that's the better movie over this to do that.
I think I might disagree with you there. Like, I feel like if I wanted to give somebody a Spider-Man origin, I'd probably give them this one because the silly campiness for some people is a wall, I think, in 2021. And I think
Sure.
it feels more in line with like a modern approach to an origin in a superhero movie, where I like Spider-Man 1 because of the campiness and goofiness. And I think maybe in terms of adapting an origin, I outside of the power stuff, I kind of prefer the origin in this movie, but Spider-Man 1, I think, is thoroughly entertaining with some highs through the whole thing, where this is kind of, like I said, we build, we build, we build, and that's it. And then it's like, okay, we're just watching stuff happen for the rest of it. And we kind of do that in Spider-Man 1 also, but we get Willem Dafoe being Green Goblin, so that's a bit of an edge.
Yeah, I think there are some more emotional payoffs in Spider-Man 1, and I think the silliness is a charm at this point to
Oh,
Spider-Man
agreed,
1.
yeah.
And there's certainly some stuff in that movie. It's like, oh, this is not good now, but it's still a fun ride, I think. Where I think you're right, this movie kind of tails off at a certain point.
So we got to rank our Spideys. Are we cool putting Andrew above Toby already?
Yeah. No
Okay,
question.
great. Perfect.
I love Tobey Maguire, and like I do really like Andrew Garfield in the Spidey suit, but watching them in these movies made me realize, like, oh yeah, they were never really well-rounded Peter Parker Spider-Man characters.
Yeah, I think you agree with me where the gold standard is Yuri Lowenthal, Insomniac Spider-Man.
Yes.
I think Andrew gets much closer to that than Toby ever did.
Oh yeah, you're right. Tobey is it's funny that we grew up with him as our Spider-Man because he is very different from most interpretations of Spider-Man. He's very subdued.
When it comes to the villain ranking, we got just Lizard to slot in here. Currently, it is Venom from Spider-Man 3, then Riot, then the New Goblin, then Carnage, then Sandman, Goblin, Doc Ock.
I would say below Sandman, above Carnage.
I will agree, but I was gonna say below Carnage because at least Carnage is entertaining.
Yeah. Okay. I'm good with that. I'm good with that because I feel like Carnage is probably more memorable than the Lizard. And like I don't really like the Lizard in this, so I have a hard time trying to defend him. So I think I'm good with that.
I was honestly kind of surprised watching this with the Kurt Connor stuff leading up to Lizard because I do think they had something leading up to that, but similar to some of the Raimi movies, once the superpower gets involved, it's like, all right, you kind of suck. You're kind of whatever now, but
yeah.
All right. Well, there you have it. As it stands, the current ranking overall for Spider-Man movies is last place Spider-Man 3, then Venom, fourth place is Let There Be Carnage, third is Amazing Spider-Man, second is Spider-Man, then number one is Spider-Man 2. Are we going to just have the same ranking as time goes on? I think we might.
That's what I was thinking. I thought this would be the movie that maybe split us, but
Me too.
I don't want to say we have a boring list, but it's a lot more standard than I was expecting.
For sure. Maybe my wild takes have toned down, but I did think Amazing Spider-Man was going to be above, like I said, but at this point, I don't know if we're going to disagree. Maybe next week we're going to disagree, but maybe a safe bet would be the Tom Holland movies.
I think you're absolutely correct. I think that is the point. We already know we disagree on Far From Home a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think you like that movie a lot more than I do.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting. But I think next week will be... I think Amazing Spider-Man 2, I don't want to say it's the dark horse, but it's certainly... I think it's the more interesting conversation of these two movies. Because I remember kind of liking that. And a lot of people hated that movie.
Again, maybe I was just a dumb kid that really loved Amazing Spider-Man and had spite for people that didn't like Amazing Spider-Man. And then when the second one came out, I really enjoyed it because I did. But maybe I was just a dumb kid, you know?
That will be an interesting watch. No doubt.
It will be. So until then, Jack, where can the Agents of Excelsior find you?
Yes, you can follow me on Twitter at FascinatedJack. What about you, Christian?
You can find me on Twitter and TikTok at Chun2D2. YouTube.com/joyclicks is where you can find me on some video uploads, as well as the video version of Excelsior. If you want the audio version of Excelsior, you can check it out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, whatever you use for your podcasting. You can rate and review the show if you appreciate what we supply to you every Saturday. And we would appreciate it if you did, because it helps the show out. If you want to help the show out further, patreon.com/joyclicks at the $1 and $5 tiers. $5 will get you producer credit on this show and every show we do, like Aaron Easton and Charles Lapland. So thank you very much. And that is going to do it for this week in Excelsior. We'll be back next week talking Amazing Spider-Man 2, more Guardians of the Galaxy talk, and hopefully a beefy detailing of Spider-Man in Marvel's Avengers. But until then, Excelsior, it's pizza time.
Excelsior, it's pizza time.